Yeah, welcome to Outside the Box. Not enough sleep edition. God, what a waste of time. What a waste of time. Oh my God. We knew it was coming. I have to watch it though. I have a sickness, apparently. I had to watch it to see if anything got announced that was actually worth jumping into today. Spoilers, nah. um, uh God. I always have a group chat. I meant to like do a live TikTok. I'm learning to be a TikToker now. That's a thing that I'm doing. I have like 5 posts at this point, and definitely worth following. People seem to be digging what I'm putting up there. So just find me at Ben Cominos. I'm available on all the socials there. Um I didn't do that. I ended up just doing a bunch of group chats with people in my life who were watching alongside me, and I have to say, um, oh, I hit the wall so many times during what we watched yesterday. It's just such an objective disconnect from what people are feeling and thinking that it rubs me the wrong way that he knows he can get away with what he's saying and what he's doing. Jerry says it's the longest State of the Union speech in history. It seriously. I looked at a list of the top 10, and it's like a bunch of MJ and LeBron stuff. It's either Donald Trump or Bill Clinton in the top 10 for longest State of the Unions. They just speak. But this one was the longest. I believe it was an hour and 8 minutes of just objective nonsense that was really hard to stomach. There was like literally 5 minutes worth of USA chanting and talking about Olympic hockey, which don't get me wrong, I've spent way more than 5 minutes talking about Olympic hockey. I'm also not a president. So maybe hold one of us to a bit of a different standard than the other, you know? I said it during every State of the Union address that you guys have known me, and I'm going to say it again now that I have a slightly larger audience. Um, we need to pass a law that says you're not allowed to clap during the State of the Union because Jerry says it's at 147, 147, 148, whatever it is. I genuinely believe 40 minutes of it were clapping. And I think that's a reasonable guess. Like, I think that's a conservative number. Like, it's reasonable to assume that 40 minutes of the hour and 47 minutes that speech went were probably just people clapping, mostly for nonsensical claims. And I feel like we should make it illegal. You go there, he says the things, and you move on. And there were some good applause points for sure, but by and large, um, as somebody who is an economics first kind of guy, as someone who focuses on the duopoly, the fact that our systems and economy are not built to work for us. um, I was disgusted by what I saw. It's posted on my Facebook and Instagram right now. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has a handful of graphs out there right now. One of the claims coming out of the Trump administration, which is enough to drive somebody up a wall, is the claims surrounding inflation, which again went up just as Joe Biden was taking office, went down halfway through the administration, and has leveled off since May of 23. It's available right there in the BLS statistics. I then married that chart with a average price of ground beef in America just during the Trump administration. Now, for the OG listeners, you know I've had farm action on this program before, and we've talked about the cost of beef, and we talked about consolidation in the industry, and we talked about how 5 companies are responsible for more than 60% of the market share, and this was all during the Biden administration. But just to highlight a point here, inflation has not gone up under the Trump administration, and yet the cost of ground beef has skyrocketed month over month for the entirety of the Trump presidency, despite the fact that inflation is down. Meaning, any conversations about inflation are not relevant to the cost of living crisis that we are going through. And I feel like I've done a good job over 3.5 years of backing up that claim. And I recognize when you do a 2.5 hour radio program every day, uh, there's a lot of people that don't listen to the whole thing. There's people that are getting in their car, they listen for 15 minutes, and then they get to wherever they're going, and they don't go and find the app or find it later, which shame on you for that. But you don't go and catch up on the other things that were said, and maybe not everybody understands my logic 100% of the time. But this is something we have talked about quite a bit here. Inflation numbers were trending down under Joe Biden, and Bidenomics was not working for the majority of people, especially working people in the country. The cost of living went up under Joe Biden, continues to go up under Donald Trump, and that is even with tax cuts for the rich, which are alleged to bring the cost of things down for us. I keep dunking on Amazon for this, but it's because the data has been made readily available by More Perfect Union. They are paying 87% less in taxes, despite making 87% less in taxes, despite making 46% more in profits, and they laid off 30,000 people. There were no raises, there was no job creation, there was no reduction in the cost of the products that they were selling. It was just a massive boon for Amazon, and everybody else ends up paying more. And for some reason, Republicans will claim that it's working because waka waka MAGA, you might be in a cult. Fun fact, California's AG is actually claims that he has uncovered evidence of Amazon and its competitors engaging in coordinated price fixing to raise prices and boost Amazon's profits. Man, if only there were a show highlighting that for the better part of the last 3.5 years, maybe more people would have their eyes open to that reality. Good thing we're jumping into it now at the very least. Rod says it's nothing but a dog and pony show. It doesn't matter what party is giving the speech. How about sit down, shut up, and listen? Then you can clap if you want at the end, or just clap a little bit, but no standing up. It's completely ridiculous. Long censored word. I don't know what it is. That any of these, again, waste of time. By the way, if you do text this show, it's been set because specifically the people that listen to Outside the Box use a lot of cuss words in the text lines. And one thing I've learned is in the Midwest is you don't say the no words. People tend to get mad when you say the no words. So we have it censored now on here. So normally I can tell by the number of asterisks what you're trying to say, but that's a long censor. So I got nothing, but I appreciate the message nevertheless. But yeah, you're exactly right. I watch this. If this weren't my job, if I were still the exceptional software salesperson that I was in my 20s, I wouldn't be watching the State of the Union. I can tell you that right now. I do this specifically to be able to talk to you guys about it in a reasonable way. And to be real, that's the claim that stuck out to me most of all. Like, I am not willing to allow the Republican Party to highlight the shortcomings of the Biden economy that were real. It was justifiable claims that were being made. But I will not allow people to, specifically in that party, to all of a sudden pretend that things are fixed while we're watching record layoffs, while we're watching job numbers get revised down to the point where Joe Biden was creating more than 100,000 more jobs than Donald Trump is monthly. Don't get me wrong, those jobs are not paying enough. Those jobs were absolutely not paying enough given the cost of living crisis that we were going through. But he was definitely creating more jobs, and it's not like the wages have improved as much as the Trump administration would like to try and gaslight you into thinking that they have over the course of the last 15 months. And what sticks out to me most of all is I posted those two charts, and it was only about an hour and a half ago as of 9:18 this morning. And some people are reacting to it. It's doing a little bit of traction. But yesterday, I posted a picture of what looks like a very fat version of Donald Trump in a suit eating a salad made of money, saying that, I'll read the exact quote. Poverty exists not because we can't feed the poor, but because we can't satisfy the rich. And I got inundated with comments and reactions and people getting mad or happy that I posted it up there. Whereas the charts, the info, the actual data really isn't eliciting the same kind of reaction. And that really is an eye-opening experience for me, because it goes to show you that a lot of people, not everybody, I'm not including everybody in these claims, but a lot of people in the world of social media aren't actually coming there for information. They're coming there to sling mud. And I've been working on, my online personality, less name calling, a little less antagonistic. When Marjorie Taylor Greene says we're doing too much name calling and doing too much antagonizing, that's probably the call is coming from inside the house at that point. You know what I mean? And we all need to reflect a little bit on how we're handling ourselves. But it sticks out to me how much people are willing to defend the billionaire class with no actual facts, with no stats. It makes me wonder sometimes if they are even real people. But then when you actually provide the statistics, you provide the facts, most people typically tend to disappear. They act like they didn't see it. They act like they don't want to talk about it. And boy, does that kind of open my eyes. And for those of you that are newer to who I am as a person, I only started doing social media for real when I started in media. I find social media to be toxic. I find it to be a waste of time. I do this really stupid thing where I live in real life and I converse with people that are actually standing in front of me. And I just kind of go out for walks. I make sure I get like an appropriate amount of sun in my life. Like, I do that kind of stuff instead of spending all my time on social media here. But I will say I do understand the addiction as I kind of throw myself into it a little bit more from a professional angle. But I promise you, the day that the cancel culture MAGA cult ends up nabbing outside the box one day because I hurt their president's feelings too badly, I promise you, you will watch me disappear off of social media immediately, because that's not where I want to spend my time if I weren't absolutely forced to do so. Jerry says the bogus claim that stood out to me the most is during the past year, the cost of rent is way down. Yeah, fun fact, my rent has only gone up during the Biden and Trump years. I have a feeling everybody within the sound of my voice could probably relate to that sentiment. Let's do that. I actually like that idea as a thing to get people texting, Jerry. What did you find is the most ridiculous claim from last night? We're going to jump into Trump RX in the next segment, because that one did pique my interest. And I said last week that I kind of have wanted to look into this, and I have been looking into it. And the fact that he brought it up means it's time for me to jump into this for real. But what did you find? 920-281-1150. If you're watching on PVN, again, the show runs from 9 to 11 Central Time. You're not going to see this till 1. Don't be texting. You're just going to text somebody else on the air that is going to have no idea what you're talking about. But email me if that's the case, if you're listening to a recording of this. But 920-281-1150. The most ridiculous claims coming out of the State of the Union yesterday. What stuck out to me was the cost of living was coming down, which is objectively not true. It's unbelievable to me that the Republican Party feels comfortable doing the Bidenomics is working claim after literally running on the Democratic Party is lying to you about the state of the economy. It's actually mind-boggling to me that they have the gall to try and actually make that a real thing. There was something about something trans. I zoned out for that. I didn't care because, Jesus, you guys are Manchurian candidates. If you don't move past this, I don't know that we're going to be able to grow as a nation. But whatever he said, I'm sure was dumb. And of course, he wouldn't flat out say the election is rigged, because I think enough people with more than 4 IQ points have come to the conclusion that Donald Trump just lost to a sundowning Joe Biden, which about freaking time. Glad you're here. Took you long enough. But he definitely dabbled in it and is pretending like there is some concerted effort. The Democrats could only win if they cheat. That says to me that he's intending to cheat in 2026. I got my head on a swivel. We'll see what ends up happening there. We got our first call coming on through here. Again, what did you find to be the most audacious claim from the State of the Union yesterday, if you, like me, hate yourself so much that you actually watched it? Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Good morning, Ben. Rick calling.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Cold this morning.
Yeah, you and me both.
Numb not from the weather, but from the State of the Union address.
What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I have two that are sort of linked. One was how he talked about, despite the terrible ruling by the Supreme Court, he was still going to institute tariffs, and he didn't need Congress to do it because it's statute already. And all the members of the Republican caucus stood up and applauded as if to say, "Oh, good. You can just do whatever you want. You don't need our approval for anything." So they're just conceding their branch of the government, I guess, to him. But the thing that really struck me was the tariffs are going to bring in so much money, we're going to be able to eliminate income tax.
Oh, right.
Remember him saying
Tell
that?
me about it. Yeah. No, I couldn't believe it when I heard that either. It's meanwhile, we've blown a multi-trillion-dollar hole in the deficit in the name of funding billionaires. But we'll be able to get rid of income tax entirely with a tariff bill that just the math is not adding up in any kind of real way.
It was it was quite a spectacle, really.
Yeah.
And the way he glorified these murders of citizens by illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, I should say. That, I mean, he almost relished giving the details of how they stuck the knife in her throat and
Yeah.
the look on her face when she knew it was going to be her last breath. It was like, ay, ay, ay.
Oh no, tell me
Completely
about it. Tell me
just
about it.
theater.
That's what it is. It's emotional, is what it is. And he also knows that, of course, anybody with a conscience would also say, "Now do what ICE is doing." But of course, no one's going to say that during the speech, and it's not a tit for tat kind of thing. But it was disgusting, and it's obviously designed to inspire a hatred towards a population of people that aren't billionaires. Is the ultimate goal there, which is an unfortunate reality. But
He was talking to his base for sure. They love that kind of stuff, to hear just how inhuman immigrants are, and
right.
and how terribly dangerous they are. And so he just loves glorifying the negative like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Hey, I appreciate the call, Rick. We'll talk soon. All right.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. And I said this last week, and I think it bears repeating. I think I'm extra hurt by those kind of moments just because I gave the benefit of the doubt. I was willing to call out the fact that Kamala Harris was called out in 2022 about not going to the border to assess the situation, and her response was so. I called out the fact that Democrats did not want to even pretend that immigration was on their radar until February of 2024. I called that stuff out, assuming that this was actually a conversation about legal immigration and not about hatred of everybody brown. Then you see Stickley and his coverage of the Somalis in Minnesota, and you see what is being done to people of all descent, of different brown skin, trying to go through the process the legal way, working, contributing to the system, paying their taxes, doing the things necessary, being vilified as if they were the member of these gangs that live rent-free in MAGA's head. And when you would call them out and say, "Are you sure you're not doing this just because you don't like Mexicans?" they would get offended by it. And then you turn around and see what has been taking place for the last 14 months. And there's no other way to interpret it. And for me to say that, it means you've lost the thread, because there's a lot of blue magas out there that didn't want to give a lot of you guys the benefit of the doubt. And I would call them out for that. And it's on you and your actions and your words and your condemnation of this president in order to prove those people wrong. And unfortunately, a lot of you are willing to defend the cold-blooded murder of American citizens in the name of getting all damn Mexicans. But don't call us racist, because that hurts our fifis. And that State of the Union moment was just another one of those examples that was very, very disappointing to see. All right. With that, I'll take anybody else's thoughts on it. 920-281-1150. Rod laughed at the idea that energy costs are down. That's another one as well. And again, I'm like, quite literally yesterday, right-wing media on the B team in Green Bay as well as down in Milwaukee are working overtime to convince you energy costs in Wisconsin are high because of Democrats, despite the fact that, as I've highlighted, Republicans have controlled the legislature, the assembly, and the Senate for 16 years. They had a Republican governor for 8 years, but somehow they're going to lay inflated energy costs at the feet of the one Democratic governor while ignoring stock buybacks. So I would go underneath posts of these right-wing media companies. I've stopped trying to fight with them because they are too entrenched, and they can't take me on because they're hacks, and like, you can't paint me into a liberal corner. So They don't take me on anymore, so I just go into their comments and say, everybody Google We Energies stock buybacks and tell me what info you come up with. And I'm now calling on everybody listening to me right now to do the same thing. You let me know what information you come out with, and you tell me why energy costs are high. Instead of playing partisan politics, you Google that. You tell me why energy costs are high. 920-281-1150. Sheila says war on fraud. How interesting. He is a fraud and I'm enlisting. You know what's funny is I saw a statistic this morning because he's talking about trying to ban what's the word? Stocks, insider trading. He's trying to ban stock market fraud in Congress, which is a good thing. I mean, it should have happened 2 decades ago. I'm all in favor of doing that. If you added up all of the insider trading fraud alleged against the entirety of Congress, House and Senate, it hits 14% of the amount of money that the Trump family has enriched themselves since January of 2025. If you add up 2 decades worth of congressional insider trading fraud alleged, it equates to 14% of the Trump fraud. It's a remarkable reality. It's a remarkable reality that we live in every single day. Paul says Trump had many lies last night, but I thought he gave Democrats an opportunity and they failed. Just stand that you agree with fair elections. Here's the problem, Paul. The elections are fair. So by standing, you're acknowledging that there was some kind of fraud that you need to be worried about. Had they stood up, then he would have said, good, then you'll vote for the SAVE Act that will require women to find their marriage license and birth certificates and passports in order to confirm their data. Again, if Republicans presented a clean, your ID is necessary to vote bill, it would pass. That's not what the SAVE Act is, and Republicans are playing games. I don't blame Democrats for 1 second for standing up. My favorite is whenever Democrats stood up and clapped because he tried to call them out for not signing Trickle-Down Economics 4.0 and tried to present it as a negative. We'll see how people end up dealing with that in the future. Joe in the email said, what stood out to me, and I yelled when he said about lowering the rent, and also during a speech there should be a board with a fact check going on for every one of his stories. I think that would be a difficult thing to do, especially given the way that this guy was talking yesterday, but I feel you. I also see you enjoyed the movie Send Help, which I'm digging that. I loved that movie last week, and I love the one I saw this week as well. Good luck, have fun, don't die. Banger. Very poignant message for 2025 or 6 America. I'll tell you what, anybody else has thoughts, we'll cram them in at the top of the next segment. Otherwise, I do want to play a clip of you guys from a local media network that talks about something we talk about all the time. And I want to show you how the media reacts to that, to talk about how you're going to get a populist movement off the ground in 2026. If you don't know what I mean, stick around. This is going to be an interesting one. We'll be right back. Outside the Box, WHBY and Political Voices Network. I'm telling you, we're watching profits and productivity to continue to go up, and at the same time, real people aren't benefiting. That either means the data's broken or the economy's broken, and either way, that should be conversation number one. Unfortunately, we're so partisan that we only care about it half of the time. I don't know how we course correct with a lot of these with a lot of these thoughts. I mean, it's so funny. Again, I said it'd be so easy to just sell out. Like on my Twitter page right now, I'm being attacked by blue MAGAs for my belief that both parties reflect the same kind of economic agenda. And on my Facebook pages, I'm getting attacked by MAGAs that are really struggling to understand how the economy works. And it would be so easy. I know the talking points of both parties. It'd be so easy to just do the talking points of one of the two parties. I'll be like, right on, Ben. And don't get me wrong, the fact that some of you guys are as into this as you are, given the way that I do this show, makes it mean so much more, because it goes to show that there are people out there that are willing to actually fight for the change that is necessary. I did a show yesterday where I highlighted that I don't believe Trump himself is racist. I believe he understands that there is a contingency of his base that is absolutely frothing at the mouth racist, and he says what he needs to say in order to get them excited, because as long as he throws them racist red meat, he hopes that he can distract them from the fact that his name is draped all over the Epstein list. And we're finding out from NPR reporting that there was an interview with a 13 and a 15-year-old girl that were claiming that Donald Trump had assaulted them when they were minors. And the fact that the economy has not improved in any kind of tangible way. He's hoping that sharing a video of the Obamas as monkeys is enough to distract them from that. But I believe that his actions and behaviors over the course of 80 years are that of a prejudiced man, are that of a man from an era when certain levels of racism were more socially accepted by white society. But that if you truly watch him interact with people of other races, I would be hard-pressed to say that I find him to be outwardly bigoted in the way that you tend to think of those kind of things. And I got some person just laying into me on the Political Voices Network page. What rock are you living under? Because there's just no room for nuance in this world anymore. And for those of you that do stick around for the nuance, I absolutely love that. And let's just say it's been a hell of an experience starting this new project on YouTube while already having kind of established myself in Northeast Wisconsin, because you guys all know what I'm about. And now I kind of have to usher in a new audience who some people are definitely on board with what's happening. But I think to a lot of people, it's jarring to hear just how much both parties suck. And case in point, in New York, NBC local, Channel 4, I have no vendetta against them. I don't know anything about them outside of this clip. If you guys don't know, and we scoff at these people in Northeast Wisconsin, they had some kind of snowstorm that is getting national coverage. I mean, don't get me wrong, they got a lot of snow, but like, grow up. We've been there before. And they're doing their man on the street interviews, right? And they're going around being like, have you ever seen this much snow? And it's so funny because if the Democratic Party had this kind of message consistency in during the election, we wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with right now. And I see I have a call. I will get you on in a second, but I want to do this first. If never mind, they hung up. Listen to this individual. He's being asked about the level of snow on the ground, but then more importantly, and I didn't adjust the audio because I want it to transcend the radio. You'll notice that he gets quieter while he's talking, and that's not by accident. That's because not once but twice the news anchor or the news reporter pulls the microphone away from his face. Not because he's cussing, not because he's being rude, not because he's being crass, but because he's attacking the one class of people that, whether you're Democrat or Republican in the mainstream, you're not supposed to attack.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's still people out in doorways looking for shelter. And I think a lot of people think this is why we shouldn't allow hedge funds to own residential property.
Boom.
And so what we were talking about earlier, too, is a little bit of the nostalgia aspect, right? Yeah. How this feels kind of like back in the 90s when we were growing up.
Yeah, like we were saying, it was much more snow, colder winters. And again, private equity didn't own so much of the housing stock in America.
Legend. That guy gets it. And that woman didn't know what to do about it. Hey, those are some of our sponsors. You can't be saying that about them. We need private equity to keep our lights on. You can't be saying that about them on these airwaves. That's the kind of messaging that you need to see come out of realistically either party, but I do not expect the pro-billionaire MAGA movement right now to do anything to address hedge fund profits, billionaire profits, or anything of the like, because everything they have done has been to the contrary of that. And if you missed Monday's program, the day after ICE murdered Renee Good, there was an announcement from the Trump administration, and I called it out then. I said it was a distraction to get people to stop talking about the murder and that I wasn't taking the bait and that I would believe it when I see it. But an announcement came down that said, we're going to crack down on hedge funds buying properties. And a lot of MAGAs would be like, Ben, isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this good news? And I said, I'll believe it when I see it. And one day after that, they revised it to be, well, not all hedge funds. We're just actually going to crack down on we're going to change the name of large, or the definition of large investment firms. We're going to change it from anybody that has 25 million or more in investments to anybody that has $1 billion or more in investments. And to be clear, less than 2% of all hedge funds are operating with more than $1 billion in investments. The majority of people are or investment firms, I should say, are operating in between that 25 million and 1 billion number. So, in other words, he made an announcement to get the headline and then didn't actually do anything. But then you marry that, and brace yourself for this, liberals. You marry that to a conversation that Golden Boy Pete Buttigieg was having with Jake Tapper, where he says, I'm not really sure how much hedge funds are actually doing to keep the price of homes and the cost of rent high. But we definitely need to see more coming out of this White House. So he's not willing to call out the cause of this, but he's also not willing to do anything about it on the back end either. But he wants to still play the good guy and highlight that the Trump administration is doing nothing to address these costs, which is a 100% factually accurate statement. But it doesn't change the fact that he isn't willing to address the corporate greed the exact same way Republicans are not willing to address the corporate greed. And I'm here to tell you right now, mark the words. What's the date? February 25th, 2026. If liberals want to play this status quo game, we won't get a feel for it in 2026 because there's going to be people from all walks of life running in a number of different environments. It's going to be very difficult to see. But if they're willing to play this, to make this gamble, that a return to the status quo politics of the Biden era, of the Obama era even, that led to Trump, if liberals want to gamble that the return to status quo politics and leaving hedge funds alone and bringing civility back to the White House is going to be what is going to win in 2028, I'm here to tell you right now that there's a chance that that is accurate, but it is a gamble. That is a 50-50 swing. We had a failing New York Times poll on Friday. 13 people took part, not a poll, a focus group. 13 people took part in it. 13 people said that they wanted to see a progressive run on the top of the Democratic ticket. The reason Tim Walz was viewed as a liability during the 2024 election is because centrists muzzled him from the parts that actually made him likable as a candidate. When asked if the Democratic Party is too liberal, over 60% of people agree. Now, some of that's, of course, going to be Republicans that don't have a firm grasp of what the word liberal means. But a large percent of that is actually coming from the left, saying this centrist milquetoast approach to governance is not going to work for the people that feel left behind by this economy, Democrat or Republican. I've said it a million times over. MAGA needs access to hospitals just as much as Blue MAGA, just as much as Bernie Bros, just as much as independents. Do something to make hospitals available and affordable, and people will like it. Of course, there's going to be people talking about DEI or CRT. You guys remember CRT? Remember when that was the boogeyman three-letter word that dealt with black people? I sure don't, because we stopped talking about it. There's going to be an inevitable population to talk about that. But the beauty of this show, the beauty of the fact that independent media is allowing free thinkers that aren't interested in trying to get more clicks, to get their thoughts out there, is that there is now going to be a larger platform for people to voice their discontent with a two-party system leaving them behind. Full stop. Full stop. That is not going to be acceptable anymore. But if liberals don't want to meet the moment, then it's third party time. And you watch Gavin Newsom back out of a 2% tax on billionaires that would take, if you haven't heard the metrics, there are 200 billionaires in California. They have a cumulative wealth between the 200 of them of $2 trillion. It's actually a 5% tax in California. I apologize. Knocking 5% off of that would bring them down to $1.9 trillion worth of wealth for 200 people in the state of California. And Gavin Newsom said that might be too extremist and we need to return to a more moderate approach. No, we done did the moderate thing, Gavin. We're done with that. Republicans don't care if you're moderate. Leftists hate you for being moderate. You're going to keep losing. It's time to actually try taxing billionaires again like we did for 40 bleeping years to the tune of the strongest middle class in human history. Got some text piling up here. Jerry says, Ben, I have to correct something from yesterday. I said during my college years the federal minimum wage increased twice. It actually increased 3 times. I appreciate that. Thanks for rubbing it in, Jerry. I love that. Brian simply says, love that clip. Exactly. Hello, Dems. We got one Todd here says, no matter your political opinion, the State of the Union was not a waste of time, especially in consideration of your job as a radio talk show host and ours as U.S. citizens. If nothing else, just seeing the people who have done heroic feats for the country, the bunch of vets that he showed, so on and so forth. Obviously, that was grandstanding on Trump's part, but nevertheless, it was extremely moving. This is a common practice of all State of the Union speeches, like it or not. I actually look forward to those moments. See, that's the difference between, well, I'll finish. While many words coming out of Trump's mouth may make your guts turn, it's also sad of anyone in Congress and the Senate to have not attended last night's speech. I give Baldwin credit for having been there. It was the right thing to do. I used to appreciate how you treated both political sides is the same. I don't see that enough anymore. That being said, I do enjoy your show. The reason you're not hearing Democratic hate, Todd, is because Democrats do not control the House, the Senate, or the presidency. I cut my teeth in radio when the Democrats had a trifecta, and you know who I left alone? The Republican Party. Now Republicans control everything, and not everything's getting fixed. It's not my problem to talk about Democrats. The fact that the Democrats didn't attend some of them, I should say, didn't attend the State of the Union is getting exactly as much coverage as Kid Rock's halftime show did on this show, in that nothing happened. I heard about 40 people attended the Democrats' State of the Union, separate of the actual one, which I hear is double the attendance for the Kid Rock halftime show. That being said, I do enjoy listening to the show. And I will say, and I kind of went on a tangent about this yesterday, and this is probably going to frustrate some people, but I surely don't care. I file marching veterans out there, hockey players out there, transgender people that decided not to go through with surgeries or whatever the hell. I tuned it out. I really wasn't listening. It's all warm fuzzies. And I grew up with a Republican dad, who always told me that there will be authority figures. He was talking more about in work, but it applies in politics as well, saying that there will be people trying to distract you with warm fuzzies in life. And when they do that, to give you an example. He would say, your boss is going to give you a new fancy title. He's going to bump you up from account executive to executive vice president of blah, blah, blah. He says, but that's not going to come with any kind of raise, and it's going to come with more responsibilities. You need to have the guts to tell that person, don't give me warm fuzzies, give me a raise. And so I carry that attitude into this program. Don't give me warm fuzzies. Address the bleeping cost of living crisis and stop lying to me about the cost of living crisis. That's my attitude towards this. That's always going to be my attitude towards this. The reason you feel like I am being harder on Republicans now is because you, Todd, are a partisan. I said Bidenomics was not working. I said that the border security was not where it needed to be. I said all of these things in an election year. The captain of Blue MAGA, Clinton, West Virginia, still holds me responsible for Kamala Harris losing Wisconsin because I wouldn't pretend that what the Democrats were saying was accurate about the economy. Waka waka, MAGA. The same is true now for Donald Trump. And no amount of guilt tripping or complaining, oh, you used to be more both sides. No, I'm the exact same, Todd. One of us changed. It just ain't the one of us you think it is. Betsy says, I agree that Trump is not a racist. He's an extreme egoist, caring only about his self-interest. Doesn't matter what color you are. If you say anything negative about him, he not only won't like you, but he will hurl immature insults at you. I believe he calculates every word and action to prop himself up to his base, and even though his thoughtless rants won't hurt him in front of his base, so he's willing to double down to ramp up the applause. The kicker is, though, Betsy, and I agree with you 100%, he's at minus 43% approval amongst independents. People aren't buying it anymore. There were people that knew the trajectory the Democratic Party had us on was garbage, but that also understand that this guy is just nonsensical, engaging in the most flagrant examples of corruption you can imagine with no intention of actually addressing anything. As I've oftentimes stated, they literally created Doge to crack down on fraud and ignored Medicare Advantage and the military industrial complex, and they expect me to continue taking them seriously. Cynthia says, who called the police on the people throwing snowballs in New York? I saw part of that story. I meant to get into that and compare that to the dude in Texas who's accused of sexual assault, and talking about how Republicans and Democrats are covering those stories two entirely different ways. Dave out in Appleton says, can't stand to look at the image of Mo, Curly, and Larry cosplayers, Trump, J.D. Vance, and Speaker Johnson. Jerry says Republicans also control the Supreme Court, very much so. And Larry out in North Carolina says, sorry, I blank the State of the Union address. That could be like nails on a chalkboard. 1,500 new jobs a month for 12 months last year. That's pathetic. Exactly. There was no job growth during the last 20 or 12 months. Of course, MAG will tell you that's because we're kicking out all them illegals. Meanwhile, anybody who's actually working understands that it's much harder to come by jobs. I've been sitting on a story for 3 days that I'm not going to have time to do here either, because we're going to have to get rolling and the professors are coming in here. Right now, the number of people, Atlantic has a story out there right now. Young people are using AI to write resumes. Companies are using AI to read resumes, and nobody's getting hired. 1 in 5 jobs posted are in all likelihood fake jobs, or what are known as ghost jobs. The previous radio company I worked for, second largest radio conglomerate in the country, they had a job posting for a part-time producer, which I was a full-time producer. They had a part-time job producer job available on the Indeeds and Monsters and, ZipRecruiters. Pick your poison. There was a job posting on every one of those 24/7. They were never hiring. And that was back in 2018, 2019. You know what I mean? And that's just one place. I'm willing to bet it's much more prevalent than people are willing to acknowledge. But, I mean, that's my take on it. And Ben says Trump can't force companies to hire. AI is slowly taking over. Ben, Joe Biden was creating 100,000 jobs a month, creating solar panels, building chip manufacturing companies. I'm not saying I want those chip manufacturing companies. They were hiring under Joe Biden. They're not under Donald Trump. Unfortunate reality. I got to get out of here. We'll have the professors on next. Outside the Box, WHBY, Political Voices. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, Political Voices Network, WHBY. We all know the drill at this point. Brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we talked a little bit about the State of the Union. We talked a little bit about message consistency. We talked about what people are looking for in politics. We're playing some local news reporting and some of just the best message consistency you'll ever see in your life. And now, if you are listening to me locally, it is a segment that you have come to know and expect every other Wednesday. If you just discovered this show within the last 10 days, allow me to introduce 2 people to you that will sound like disenfranchised voices right now, because the video software that I use is like, if you want a second camera, we need $80 a month. And I was like, no. So we're not doing that right now. And the way we're doing this is you will hear the voices of Arnold Schober, a current professor of political science at Lawrence University, and Jerry Poder, a retired history professor also from Lawrence University. That is a liberal arts school in our neck of the woods here, very similar to the kind of school that I went to in Meadville, Pennsylvania. They join us every Wednesday or every other Wednesday, and kind of break down some of the biggest stories from an academic perspective that to provide some insight that one bachelor's degree Greek that's a little angry about things maybe can't get into in the same way that a couple of PhDs can. Yeah, a little more rational than the way that I handle things here. It's not necessarily a debate. It's just a conversation between a bunch of people that enjoy discussing these things with one another. Again, it's every other Wednesday, so we'll figure out a way to get them on camera. For today, though, it's just going to be the voices. How are you guys doing today?
Doing very, very well. Still basking in the glow of not just 1, but 2 Olympic gold medal victories for the United States. So I'm very happy about that.
We're going to jump into that together in a second. Jerry, how you doing, Arnold?
Doing great on another beautiful winter day with sun. It's sunny and clear, just like it was in California.
Yeah,
last
right,
time.
where I was last time, and I can't stand this weather.
Yeah, I know.
And actually, I've got a news flash for you. We're going back to California for 2 weeks. For 2 or 3 weeks. So next time I will be calling in again from sunny California.
Ooh, maybe we'll
so
teach
you. Won't even be on camera then either.
Well, no, that actually makes it easier because then we can just stream, which I'm sure Jerry will just pick up immediately. There will be no.
Oh, good God!
Get out your Zoom etiquette, Jerry.
Spare me.
We'll talk more about that later. But before we get into the politics today, although technically I guess we are going to kind of get into the politics today of this, Jerry, you were excited about the both Olympic gold medals, but specifically the men's for a reason that hits home for you in the NHL as well. I talked about this as someone who is also a big-time hockey fan, but I'll let you kind of lay it out there. You watched that game happen. You woke up early Sunday. The ending, you definitely didn't see coming.
I didn't see coming because my favorite player, my favorite hockey player in the whole world, Jack Hughes of the New Jersey Devils, my favorite hockey team in the whole world. Not the most well-known hockey team, but a team that I've rooted for 40 years. I'm originally from the New York area, New Jersey area. Jack Hughes scored the goal, the golden goal to beat the Canadians. And except for the Miracle on Ice in 1980, this is, I think, our greatest Olympic, at least our greatest Olympic hockey moment. So my first reaction when the goal was scored was, we won. We won. I can't believe this. We were completely outplayed in the entire game.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but we won. And the second was, oh my God, it was Jack Hughes.
Yeah.
Jack Hughes. So that was my initial reaction. But after that, things became political, as they often do.
Yeah.
In terms of the U.S. men's team action to winning the gold, and I think contrasting, I think with the women's team, the women's team turned down an invitation to come to the State of the Union, and I think I think there may have been some politics involved in that. The men's team are partying in nightclubs and singing the Star Spangled Banner at 3 a.m. in some nightclub in Miami. Hughes gave an interview after the goal saying specifically that he was proud to be an American, that he loved the country, and that even that, I think, has become a politicized kind of statement.
Yeah, and Arnold, we have had the conversation at least a half a dozen times on this show talking about if there were a 9/11 style event, would America be able to coalesce around it? This obviously not being that dramatic, but it's the same principle. You think about 1980. I was not alive for it. You were what? Barely alive for it, if you were even alive.
I was very much alive.
Jerry was very alive for it. But,
I was alive.
yeah, sort of. But like you hear the stories about what took place there, Jerry. You lived it. You saw the cohesion that was brought about by that, and it's not apples to apples. We do not look at Canada the way we looked at Russia in the 80s, right. But the fact that something like this, I feel like there was patriotism for 10 minutes, and then we had to go back to the bickering back and forth. Is this just another example of kind of where we stand in terms of partisanship? And this will kind of tie into the conversation about the Supreme Court we're gearing into here. But is that kind of how you view this?
Yeah, it is. It is unfortunate. I'll say that moments. So the Olympics, for better or worse, are supposed to emphasize kind of athletic prowess and like, let's drop this talk about separate nations, right? You represent a nation, but we're there for the games, right? That has almost never actually been true. Once there was a Cold War, right, is always against the Soviets. But I think one of the things that it did do is give Americans an opportunity to say we're rooting for the same team or the same people, at least for these 2 weeks, right? Or 4 weeks if you count the summer. But I think that with so many other things, they've also entered this era where who you're with or who you're attached to is as important as who you are. And so by going to the State of the Union, right, Trump didn't like make he praised them, right? This gave a medal of
freedom,
honor for
freedom.
freedom
Yeah.
to Hellebuck.
Connor Hellebuck.
But I so not really partisan, but I think the fact that they're now kind of attached to Trump, who is a polarizing figure, right? Has kind of shown how far apart the country has come for an event that should be pretty much hooray. These
Yeah.
guys did a great
Right.
job. This is amazing. Not as amazing as 1980. They're pros after all.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, like, this is great. I mean, we've played Canada, I don't know, 7 or 8 times and have lost all of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes in excruciating fashion, as in overtime in 2010.
Sidney Crosby. I remember
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I think it really is kind of a symptom of something deeper, that Americans have very little to rally around, even easy things that they could rally around, where in the past, obviously there's always people in the outs, but there were some clear things that people, no matter what their politics were, could say, yes, this is fun, this is exciting, right? I get that kind of that funny butterfly feeling when the Star Spangled Banner plays, and even if I don't like anything else about the country, I don't know how many more events there are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what
Days.
sucks most of all about it is, as a big time hockey fan, in the NHL, Canadian teams have a little bit of a superiority complex in the league, right?
Right.
And my entire life, I've had fun dunking on Canadian teams, both on Friday after Megan Keller's awesome breakaway goal
Right.
and after Jack Hughes's goal. I started talking crap, and I have to be like, I want to be clear, this is like a fun rivalry and not some type of overt disdain that I have for Canada or its
Right,
people.
right. I think you may have pointed out that the last time a Canadian NHL team won the Stanley Cup was something like 32 years ago.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there is a deeper issue here, and that is displays of unalloyed patriotism. In other words, the men's team, you know, some of them missing teeth, singing the national anthem at, you know, in full throat. As the medals were being presented, or singing it at 3:00 in the morning in the Miami nightclub, that has become somewhat controversial. So unalloyed expressions of patriotism are now a political statement in ways that they may not have been, and I think they were not in 1980, and I was there. In 1980, Republicans and Democrats were waving the flag, basically. So I think that's become an issue.
I think the other thing that's true about this is Canada isn't, like you mentioned, Ben, isn't an arch rival. So if we had beaten, say, North Korea in hockey, I mean, this would, or China, right, more realistically, this would have had a much different tenor, I think, as opposed to Canada, which is kind of our frenemy at the moment, apparently. But nevertheless, there's not been this same kind of level of animosity or threat or fear, if you think about the USSR, that endued the 1980 Lake Placid Olympics with so much spark, if you will, and so much patriotism. So I think there's some of that going on too. So it might be there if we had a different opponent, but I think because of the tensions between Trump and Carney in Canada, and just general disintegration of kind of good ties, I think has made it a little more fraught than it might otherwise have
But
been.
I you know, and we've talked about this before in terms of the Democratic Party possibly ceding the issue of patriotism to the Republicans, which I saw historically begin in the 1960s with the arguments over the Vietnam War. Politically, Democrats need to be careful. This is, you know, we talk about 80-20 issues that do not favor the Democrats, and we can talk a little about those when we talk about the State of the Union address last night. But patriotism is not an 80-20 issue. It's a 99-1 issue. You don't want to be on the other side of that. And I know that many on the left are very uncomfortable with jingoistic expressions of patriotism. And I think many of us are somewhat uncomfortable with that. But I would caution them, do not get on the wrong side of that issue. It is not a winning issue.
Well, I guess one thing to think about is, so PJ O'Rourke, kind of the late kind of on the right comedian, once said that folks on the left think of patriotism and like love of country is kind of like the way you love your child. It's like, oh, I wish they wouldn't do that, but you still love them, right? Where patriotism on the right is like, I don't care what my kid did. It's my kid. Hooray, do it again. And so his point was that there is a different tenor of patriotism. And I do agree with Jerry that if some fraction of the Democratic Party says, well, we don't even love our kid anymore, that's a problem, because now you're rooting for failure as opposed to we're rooting to do things differently, which I think is a different kind of patriotism than the jingoistic kind that you were mentioning.
Right.
The way I described it on Monday, I said being proud of the country you're from is kind of like me being proud of being tall. Like, I'm happy I'm tall. I'd rather be tall than not, but I didn't do anything to accomplish this.
Well,
I didn't do anything to be American. I was born
yeah.
in America, and I'm happy I was born in America. I'd rather be born in America than somewhere else. But I feel like that's my view on the matter here, at the very least.
Well, if you view America as standing for something, standing for democracy, standing for representative government, standing for equality and freedom, I think then you can be proud to say that you're an American, because we are trying to perpetuate those ideals, sometimes in a very hostile world. You can say, well, America is probably the longest successful democratic experiment in world history. I'm not up on how long the the Greek Athens, how long it lasted, or how long Rome lasted.
Not as a democracy.
Not as a democracy. So you can say that as an American, I hope that I am contributing to that.
Sure.
And I am proud of that.
I dig that. That's the way. It's the actions. That's
not just because otherwise it's just laundry. Jerry Seinfeld would joke about rooting for a team. You're just rooting for laundry, basically. It's got to be more than that.
Is that black and gold? Is that black and gold? Give it to me.
Right. Yeah.
No, I feel that.
He, as I am, as a Mets fan, it's orange and blue.
Right.
So you root for colors and you root for laundry. Well, America's more than laundry. It should be more than laundry. So we would hope that the U.S. men's team, as excited as they are to be Americans, are excited for a reason, not just because it's laundry.
Yeah, I dig that. And we're just getting this conversation warmed up. That wasn't even in our rundown. We just went with it for 13 minutes. Wait till you get to the stuff we actually intended to talk about. That's Jerry Podair and Arnold Schober, the professors from Lawrence University. We're going to put a pin in this. I don't know if we're going to go into the Supreme Court decision on tariffs or the State of the Union, because both of those make sense given what we were just talking about. We're going to discuss it during the commercial break. You're all just going to have to find out when we get there. So stay tuned. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, and Political Voices Network. All right, we're back. Jerry Podair, Arnold Schober, both the professors from Lawrence University, joining me here. We spent the first segment talking a little bit about the reaction and unfortunate fallout from a victory for the American hockey teams, men and women's, to kind of cap off the Olympic run here. Now we get into what we actually intended to talk about. And for those of you that are new to this program, we here in Wisconsin have a Supreme Court that has its issues, has its partisan issues, and the three of us have talked about this quite a bit, and those obviously carry over, and I know I don't have to tell a lot of you seeing this right now, into the National Supreme Court as well. A recent ruling came down on Friday, right around 10 a.m. our time, surrounding Trump's tariff plan and the ways that they have been enacted here. Came down 6-3, including some of the appointees from Donald Trump himself ruling against these tariffs. And Arnold, I always start with you on Supreme Court because I always joke. I joke that you are, if everybody thought like you, I think the Supreme Court would be in a better position because you expect them to actually do the job the right way. You focus on the case law.
Thanks for the flattery, Ben.
Yeah. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Well, I think I agree.
Am I wrong? Please, if I didn't mean it, I promise you I wouldn't be saying it.
Yeah.
But so you see this happen. This is two-pronged, and then we're gonna get into the history of it with Jerry. Were you surprised it didn't go 9-0? Were you more surprised that it didn't go 9-0, or that we actually saw a removal of that partisanship that we almost feel is baked into the court process at this point?
What was very striking was that you have three groups on the Supreme Court. Now you've got the three liberals, right, who are not going to vote for Trump on anything, essentially.
But they did vote to keep him on the ballot.
They did.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. True. Right. All right.
Because they had to.
And the other thing I will say as trivia, under John Roberts, the court has issued more 9-zip rulings than any other Supreme Court in U.S. history. So
Wow.
he's actually pretty good at keeping people on the same page. We forget about all those boring 9-0 rulings.
Sure, sure.
Nevertheless, but you can see three groups on the court on contested issues. You got the three liberals who generally are going to find ways to rule against Trump if they can.
Sure.
You have the three kind of hardcore conservatives, Alito, Thomas, and then I guess swing hardcore. It depends who the other one is. And then three kind of centrists. And so Barrett is clearly a centrist. Gorsuch, definitely, right? The right was complaining about the golden boy Gorsuch being kind of a turncoat, right? But he's very principled if you read his rulings. He has a set of an idea of what the government should be like, and that's what he keeps to. And then Kavanaugh kind of is that swing person. So sometimes he's in this third group, and sometimes
of course Roberts himself.
That's true. Roberts is always in the middle. Okay,
Yeah.
he sees himself as keeping the court legitimate.
He
somehow.
herds the cats.
But what was interesting about the ruling is that I thought actually that all of the conservatives would rule together. We've talked about that earlier on the show, because if you read his concurring opinion, he's hitting like golden boy, right?
Yeah.
Golden kind of conservative talking points, major questions doctrine. Congress didn't let the president do this. Let's restrain the executive. We need to let people have a say. I mean, all these things that should light up conservatives' brains. Like, yes, we don't want the government doing all this to us. We want Congress to be the voice of the people. Well, maybe they don't say that, but we don't want the executive making unitary or unilateral decisions. And, right, that didn't get people like Thomas, who really like the major questions doctrine.
Yeah.
And so that was surprising to me. I thought that the three conservatives in dissent, Kavanaugh was something of a pragmatist. So the other two conservatives, Alito and Thomas, weren't very convincing to me. It's like, why should Trump have this authority? Right? Kind of foreign affairs, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
Trump, economic policy is never foreign affairs. So I think that was surprising to me. So that was the surprise. Not that it was 9-0, because you could make a case, like Elena Kagan could have made a case, in fact, that Trump had this power. She's a big fan of executive power. She wrote a big book on this when she was at Harvard. Like, executive power is great. This was an opportunity for her, but she didn't take that bait in this case. So the makeup was a surprise, and the decisions to support the president were a surprise to me.
Yeah, the president has power, has almost exclusive power in foreign affairs, is really what the dissenters hung their hat on. That once you get past the water's edge, once you get into the area of foreign affairs, and this Emergency Economic Act mentions specifically national emergencies caused by foreign threats, you could give the president leeway in that area and say, okay, we are talking about delegated powers here, tariffs, but we're also talking about foreign affairs, and we can stretch it and give the president the benefit of the doubt. I think that's what the dissenters were trying to do.
Yeah, but it was a stretch,
Yeah, it's a
right?
stretch,
This is
yeah.
a big stretch. I mean, yeah, because so I just made the claim that tariffs are never actually foreign affairs. That viewpoint is like, well, everything's foreign affairs, right? And so it's like, it was such a stretch that in this case, because the emergency isn't new, right? It's not pressing. And so it'd have been very hard. At least it'd be hard to convince me, but right, I'm not on the court.
But in terms of executive power and allowing the federal power, there's a analogy to the Interstate Commerce Clause here, where the Interstate Commerce Clause was traditionally interpreted by the Supreme Court very narrowly. But as we get into the 1960s and the Civil Rights era, interstate commerce is given a broader and broader interpretation. Now, historically, and I was thinking about this when I was reading about the tariff decision. If you want to go back to the 1930s, the Supreme Court in the 1930s, the so-called 9 old men, conservatives, struck down a great deal of Roosevelt's New Deal legislation, in part on interstate commerce grounds. It struck down the National Recovery Act or National Recovery Administration, which is a form of business government cooperation in setting prices, setting production, might be a model for industrial policy today, struck down largely on interstate commerce grounds. The specific case in 1935 was called the Schechter poultry case. And the key ruling by the court was these chickens, this poultry company, this is all local commerce. This is not interstate commerce, and federal government, you can't regulate it. Same thing in Butler versus the United States in 1936, which strikes down the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Once again, agriculture, according to the Supreme Court, is viewed as not interstate commerce, which, you know, I think is probably wrong, but they strike it down on no interstate commerce grounds. But by the 21st century, the Interstate Commerce Clause gets a very, very wide and broad interpretation. And I think, as Arnie says, ironically, the conservative justices on this tariff case are also trying to interpret the idea of foreign relations or foreign affairs, foreign matters in a very, very broad way.
You know, listening to you talk, apropos of nothing, it is kind of it's jarring to hear, because whether you're talking about the 30s, which like long grand scheme of things isn't that long ago, or the 80s, you hear about Jimmy Carter and his peanut farm, and you hear about this case law coming down to chickens, and it just seems so provincial and not that long ago compared to the conversations of today. And that's just
the
goes.
Schechter poultry case was called the sick chicken case.
That's what I'm saying, and it's really not that old.
Sick chickens,
and I think it was like 10 chickens too, as a matter of fact.
a good number of them. And the Schechter brothers went all the way to the Supreme Court to preserve their right to purvey sick chickens.
Just nonsense when you break it down. But here we are, and we use the Schechter chicken case to make these decisions now today. What sticks out to me, though, and obviously sticks out to you guys, we'll use this as a great segue into what took place yesterday. I'm old enough to remember Barack Obama chastising the Supreme Court for the Citizens United ruling. Now, if you listen outside the box in the audience, there's a more than 1 in 1 chance that you are probably anti-Citizens United, but it wasn't the rule of the president at that time to do that kind of thing. We have come to expect that kind of reaction out of Donald Trump here, and it was relatively muted for his kind of approach. Do you think that says something like the polling data is low on tariffs? I know that. Does that think maybe he understands the political? Trump is a lot of things. He's not politically stupid. Do you think he's reading the tea leaves here? Do you think there's something else? Arnold, why don't you start here? And,
sure.
What are you thinking?
I think there's a couple. I mean, Trump is a very unusual politician in many ways, which we can talk about as we have for the last 10 years now. But I think one thing that Trump can be is extremely gracious if he needs to be. He shook all 4 members of the court who were there. He shook their hands on the way in yesterday. He refrained from calling them names. He only called the ruling, and this was more surprising to me, kind of a great disappointment.
Disappointing.
Great disappointing, rather than what he was doing on Truth Social or wherever it was this last week about how it was like spawn of Satan or something. Okay. So he was extremely restrained, I thought. I mean, also came to mind that Obama example where he's like talking to the court directly. So I think Trump can do that. Now, later in the speech, right, he's ragging on Nancy Pelosi. Obviously, he's not always very gracious, right?
Yeah.
As we know. But I think he is aware that, particularly because 2 of his 3 appointees ruled against him, that he doesn't want to come out and like antagonize them, because there's other cases like the Trump versus Slaughter case coming up, which has to do with appointees that he wants to win. He doesn't want to antagonize the Supreme Court members either. And to the point about polling, right? Trump is aware that one of the things that folks on the right really like about him is the amount of justices he's put on the court system. And so he also wants to, I think, show that, okay, I lost one. I'm upset about it. I'm going to kind of do it anyway, but I don't want to cut off that part of my political persona.
Right. And I think there is an element of the, let's say, the cat that swallowed the canary look on Trump's face, because I think what happened was his advisors then told him on Friday, as he probably raged around the Oval Office, wait a second, sir, there are other ways to do this. You can get your tariffs, but through other laws. And I think that's what he is going to try to do. And I think that gives him the confidence to shake the hands of justices who ruled against him because, okay, I'm going to get my way eventually anyway, so I'm not going to press this.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more there. Anna on the text line says the word he used a lot was unfortunate. I guess that's
right.
Out to
Unfortunate
her.
and disappointing.
Yeah, that was the way he was talking about Matt's. Love the bass professors. Don't put words in my mouth, Matt. Did anything else stick out to you guys about what you saw last night? Did you stay up for that marathon of I saw it's like MJ and LeBron. Like the top 10 longest speeches are either Donald Trump or Bill Clinton.
Yes.
And that takes talent.
He broke the record. My wife sent me upstairs to watch the speech by myself on the other TV upstairs, and I was up there for almost 2 hours. And when I finally came down, I think she did he actually speak that long? Well, he did.
Yeah.
But he was for Trump, restrained, on script. And I expected some explosions, and I didn't see that. What struck me was that he very skillfully put Democrats on the spot on what we call 80-20 issues. And I actually acronym them. I call them CIT: crime, immigration, and broadly transgender. I mean, larger cultural and social issues. And he managed to put the Democrats on the spot on all three of those issues with this stand up if you agree with me.
Yeah.
So I think he was skillful, or at least the speechwriters were skillful in doing that. The Democrats also, I thought, were relatively restrained. I expect more fireworks. I mean, Al Green got thrown out in the first 3 minutes.
Sure.
That happened last time too, so that's kind of his shtick.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's his shtick. It's almost like starting a fight in the first 3 minutes of a hockey game and getting thrown out.
Right.
But I thought, there were some Democrats who were wearing white, which is what they did last time. But I think they were pretty restrained. Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, had told them basically, behave yourselves. There is precedent, okay? One of the things that historians are always thinking about is precedent. If you do this to me, somewhere down the line, I'm going to do that to you. And that is basically what keeps Congress together, at least to some degree, and to some degree of civility as well.
I think too, for the Democrats, I don't think I'm out on a limb here, are feeling pretty good about this year's chances. And so what do they get by making a scene?
Yeah.
They kind of feel like they're going to probably eke out a majority in the House. It probably won't be a huge majority, but I think they'll probably eke out a majority. And it's like, this isn't going to get us anything. We've got Spanbauer on, who is presiding over a redistricting fiasco,
Right.
if you ask me, in Virginia. But
See, I told you he was like this.
Yeah. But regardless, but they're going to pick up seats, and they also know that Trump is down, right? He's to first term approval rating levels now, where up to this point he's been kind of good for Trump, right? And so now he's looking like the first term. They're feeling good about their chances. Throwing kind of tantrums or yelling, other than a few cases, right, isn't going to get them any political points. I guess I was less convinced that the litmus tests that Trump threw out were necessarily good political theater, although I do agree he tried very hard to make the Democrats sound like they were un-American.
Well, he
right?
said at one point, "You people are crazy."
He did. Yeah. That Trump speak, right? This is something I totally could imagine or see him say.
Yeah.
But I think they don't feel the need to make a scene because they're feeling better about their political prospects going forward.
Makes sense for sure.
And it's the Republicans have such a narrow majority in the House. I don't think I've ever seen it like this, that they are desperate to keep. There is a Republican congressman in Texas who had I think his last name is Gonzalez.
I believe so. Yeah.
Had an affair with a staffer. She ended up committing suicide, burning herself to death. Under normal circumstances, he would be out of he would be out of there.
It's barely a blip on the radar,
Yeah.
honestly, right now.
What I noticed about Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is he said he's going to visit with him and tell him to apologize or something like that, but he is not going to tell him to resign. And I think under normal circumstances, Mike Johnson would say, you have to resign. But the majority is so narrow, he feels he has no choice.
Yeah, it's a strange time to be following this kind of stuff. That's
Yeah.
for sure. We are going to pivot sort of out of what we're talking about here and look back into history. We had the passing of a civil rights icon last week, Jesse Jackson. Talked about it on this show quite a bit, but we're going to get the professor's perspective on it, as well as a talk about people that ran for the presidency and lost during their time and the impact that they had on the political process and campaigns moving forward. It should be an interesting conversation that we're going to have to cram into way too short of a period of time. If this is your first time listening to this segment, get used to it. That's Arnold Schover, Jerry Podair. I'm Ben Cominos. You're listening to Outside the Box on WHBY and Political Voices Network. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, WHBY, Political Voices Network. If you're watching this on YouTube later today, this last hour is I feel like I'm part of the audience. I'm just listfully listening to a conversation back and forth here, but hopefully you guys are enjoying it. These are both the professors from Lawrence University, Arnold Schober, Jerry Podair. We want to end the conversation here, A, focusing on Jesse Jackson, and of course, B, talking a little bit about the legacy he had as a candidate that lost running for president, and then the grander scheme of things here as well. So I kind of open the floor to the conversation. Let's talk about his political career first, and then we'll kind of broaden it from there. Jerry, why don't you take center stage on this from a historical perspective?
Well, Jesse had a unique political career because he began as an activist outside the traditional electoral system. He was an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King. He was instrumental in putting together and running, at least to some extent, the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. His Operation Breadbasket in Chicago was an activist economic organization. But by the 1980s, he had made a decision to turn to electoral politics. And in 1984, he ran a strong and plausible campaign for the Democratic nomination for the presidency. And I think that is a unique trajectory right there. I think that Jackson met the Democratic Party at a particular moment when it was moving towards the left. In other words, a Jackson candidacy for the presidency pre-1972 had just not happened.
Sure.
It would have been ludicrous. But what George McGovern, another defeated presidential candidate in 1972 for the Democrats, did was he helped move the party to the left. He helped move the party in the direction of an expanded New Deal, basically, completing the mission of the New Deal. And what Jackson did in 1984 with his Rainbow Coalition is he expanded that interracially, and I think that is really his major contribution to American politics, to take a prior career which was basically race-based and making it into a class-based coalition, or trying to make it into an interracial class-based coalition. To take over the Democratic Party.
I couldn't agree more. And I said to you off the air, I feel like his campaign would almost fit in more significantly today than it even did in the 80s. We had a caller call in the day of the passing and say, in the 80s, and she openly admitted, she's like, we used to say he plays the race card too much. And upon reflecting on the way he carried himself then compared to today, it's like, oh, actually, a lot of the stuff he was saying made a lot more sense than we maybe gave him credit for in the 80s, which kind of goes to show you the trajectory the party's been on there. Arnold, you listed a couple of examples outside of Jesse Jackson that kind of stuck out to you. Let's do we have just under 5 minutes, so let's start. Yeah, let's start with the people that made a contribution. Each of you guys give your examples of what you have, and then we'll go into people that kind of lost and didn't move the needle at all.
So I think we thinking about losing candidates that shifted the discussion if nothing else. I would include someone like Eugene V. Debs, who ran in the early 20th century from prison, no less, for president, but a labor leader
as a socialist.
Socialist, and he got several million votes, as I recall.
Over a million
over
votes
a million
from a prison cell in 1920.
And so clearly changed the conversation. Later pardoned by Herbert Hoover. It's like this guy's Harding. Excuse me. Thank you. Yes, your favorite president.
Yeah, my favorite president.
By Harding. Thank you. So he was definitely there. I think John Anderson in 1980 also deserves a mention as kind of the unhappy conservative wing of the Republican Party that wasn't into Reagan. Right? How can we have a common sense Republican Party that Reagan isn't providing? Also gave a kind of a voice to this third party, Ross Perot-ish kind of movement that culminates in, I would argue, the Tea Party in 2010. Would be another big candidate on that. And I think also we might think about someone like Adlai Stevenson being kind of the foil for Eisenhower, who no one knows what he thinks, but everyone knows he's a great guy. Stevenson coming across as an egghead. He was an egghead and was a terrible politician, but did represent kind of that technocratic view that really takes over the federal government in the 1960s when you think about Vietnam and the space race and all this kind of thing.
And takes over the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
Stevenson is an elitist. He is a brilliant man, but he is at least viewed in the 1950s as an elitist. And I think that there is some connection between Adlai Stevenson and the way the Democratic Party is viewed today. Now,
your examples, Jerry?
My examples, way back, 1876, Samuel Tilden, the Democratic candidate for the presidency, a disputed election. He may or may not have been robbed of the election, but the Democrats that year were ready to march on Washington to get Tilden inaugurated. They backed off largely because there was an agreement to end Reconstruction. The Republican president, Rutherford B. Hayes, promised to pull federal troops out of the South. Reconstruction ends, and the era of Jim Crow begins, basically, and disenfranchisement that lasts almost 100 years in the South. So we can say that Samuel Tilden, the Democratic candidate, although he lost the election, had a tremendous effect on policy. Racial policy going forward for about 100 years. So I would say that in his case, he won by losing, although the result was not necessarily a great result.
So you're saying Dominion voting systems were acting up even back then?
They were acting up even. They had that. There was so much fraud on both sides that no one could figure out that election.
Yeah,
it was decided by one electoral vote.
Oh wow. Yeah. I can only imagine in that era where you don't have instant access to the information. You just someone bring a newspaper out. Let me know what happened 3 weeks after the fact. It's remarkable. We are pressed up against it. Literally 15 seconds each. People that lost with no consequence whatsoever.
Harold Stassen ran for president 10 times and lost 10 times in a row.
Bob Dole in 1996.
It's my turn. Come on.
He had his turn.
Oh yeah, right. That's one. I always struggle to remember his name, and I was alive for that one. So that sums it all up right there. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this segment here. That's Jerry Podair and Arnold Schober. As I mentioned, they join us every other Wednesday to break down basically the things that have taken place over the course of the last 2 weeks, or at least as much of it as we can get into in about 45 minutes. Fun fact, this show's runtime is 5 minutes longer than the longest State of the Union address ever still. And we do it every day.
Run for president.
Yeah, exactly. Easy peasy. Thank you for being here, guys. If you didn't get a chance to hear the entire show or the first hour, check it out on the WHBY app, anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. And, of course, it will be rebroadcast. You can watch it live on YouTube, Political Voices Network at 1 p.m. Central Time. Haley's up next. We'll talk to you tomorrow.